But this is a big push, right? We want to push STEM, and we want to push STEM for women and girls and get them involved. And it's very easy to, like you said, once you feel like you're getting left behind, it's very easy to stay behind. Like it's hard to catch up, you know? And a
Mm.
lot of it is just confidence. And what I realized when I was older is the reason I thought I was an absolute idiot and couldn't do maths is because I didn't understand why.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 3 of the Trailblazer series for the AWSN Mentoring Program. This initiative is helping to break down and demystify barriers about entering in and staying in the security industry. We interview role models and leaders from industry and government about how they got to be where they are today, tips and tricks they picked up along their journey, and how mentors have influenced their career. In this episode, we interview Rachel Greaves, CEO and co-founder of Castle Point Systems. We discuss Rachel's origin story, how studying anthropology led to a passion around linguistics and around rules and patterns, and how that has applied her to creating a multi-award winning regtech company from Australia. Rachel talks about experiences of her own journey, recent breaches, compliance, governance, technology, and a whole heap more about mentoring. I did make a mistake during the recording where I didn't put the settings on properly, and so you'll only see Rachel, you won't see both sides of the interview, including myself, but that's probably a pretty good deal. I hope you enjoy this episode, and let's get into it for number 3 of the Trailblazer series. Let's go. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the AWSN Mentoring Program Trailblazer series. We're very lucky to be joined by Rachel Greaves, CEO and co-founder of Castle Point. Hi Rachel, thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And as I've been mentioning to the team at AWSN, I'm actually, personally super excited because we know each other personally, fellow Canberra startups, and we've been doing this Trailblazer series for a couple of episodes now with Abigail Bradshaw from ACSC, and the next one about to come out is Julie Inman Grant, the e-safety commissioner. And then I'm speaking with yourself as, an amazing entrepreneur in the security space out of Canberra. I'm super excited about. With these series, we like to focus on the human side of the security industry, the people in the program, everything from very seasoned mentors through to emerging talent. And then the mentees themselves are people that might be discovering security for the very first time, in a TAFE course, a university course, a master's course, or we actually get quite a number of transitioning workers too that have a great depth of experience from other industries, and that have coming into cyber now or security now and kind of learning from that lens. So what I thought we might do is we'll start off with a bit of the Rachel Greaves origin and journey, and we love a good superhero origin story. And so what we might do is would you mind beginning with just telling us a little bit about what Castle Point is as a company and what its focus is?
Yeah, for sure. So Castle Point is artificial intelligence, and our vision when we created it, and our vision every day that we try to achieve, is to use it to change the way the world manages its information. So we want all the information that we manage in all kinds of organization, government, commercial, and everyone else, to be understood, to be registered, to be classified, so that we know what we have and where it is and what it's about and what inherent risk it has and what value it has. And really importantly, who's doing what to it and what rules apply. and whether they're being met. So we're what's called a RegTech solution, a regulatory technology, and our job is to make sure that organisations can be safer with that information and be smarter with that information, and ultimately help protect the stakeholders the information is about, which sometimes is people, sometimes it's communities, sometimes it's other companies. So that's the broad purpose of the product.
Excellent. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, as a fellow startup founder, I find origin stories super interesting. So a lot of people have ideas, and I've tried to chuck in a few castle-related, metaphors here. Ideas, but the moat between ideation and execution is rarely bridged. Can you please share with us about the story about how Castle Point was created, the early days of the company, and what made you want to jump into the crazy world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, for sure. We made it because we needed it. So I was auditing. We started our company in 2012 as a specialist audit company, compliance audit. So I'm a certified auditor and a certified records manager, and I'm certified in privacy. I'm certified in security. So I'm like a regulatory person. And my co-founder, Gavin McKay, is a technologist and has been for a very long time. So we wound up working together on a particular client, and we worked so well together that we decided to start our own company in 2012. And that went so well that eventually we decided to get married too. So that's part of the origin story. The auditing we were doing was mostly Department of Defense, but also some other kind of big agencies and some smaller ones. And I would do the above the line audit and say, okay, well, how did this go wrong? Like, what rules aren't you complying with? How bad is this breach? What could you have done differently? How can we stop it happening again? And Gav would do the below the line and say, look, architecturally, how was this set up? How could it have succeeded? Why didn't it succeed? How could it have been scalable, etc.? So, by our powers combined, we had a pretty good coverage for these organizations. So we went, place to place, and we found the same problems everywhere. And we found problems for ourselves, number one. So when I would audit and I would find some like absolute hair-raising breach of privacy or security in some corporate systems, and I have found things that you just would not believe. I would obviously escalate that and say, look, I found this. And quite often, at that time at least, the organization would say, ooh, yeah, but you just found one, so it's probably okay. It's not okay. It's just in that sample, I found one, and I'm a human woman, right? I can't read a petabyte of data in this system. You can trust me that there's more, but I couldn't evidence it, right? So for our own purposes, we wanted to be able to quantify the impacts of these breaches, show not just how many there were, but how bad they were and how frequent they were. So we could actually do something about it. Like, you can't manage what you can't measure, right? That's always been the problem. So we just couldn't really do our job well without a way to read everything. We needed to be able to read everything in the environment, every document, email, database row, chat message, web page. We had to know what it was about, no matter where it was, like any kind of system, on-prem, cloud, structured, unstructured, any format of information, any age of information. You've got to be able to know what you have, because if you don't know what you have, you can't manage it properly. And there was no technology actually in the world that could do that. So that was the challenge, is how do we get that full coverage so we know what we have and we can manage it compliantly for its life cycle, meaning not just discovery, but also audit, reporting, cybersecurity, privacy, and records retention. How can we do that with the technology available? And we couldn't, so we had to build one.
Yeah, wow. Inventing something first in the world, very exciting. When you were moving from the consulting side into the system side of things, something that could, read the petabytes and, provide all the information. How did you feel working with those first couple of clients under that different auspice, the different banner of having the product as opposed to yourself and Gavin being the products as the consultants? Was it that you were very proud that you'd invented this thing? Was it that you're excited, overwhelmed, challenged, everything all at once?
Yeah, look, all those things. It's a kaleidoscope of emotions. um, Running any kind of business. Luckily, we'd been running a business already for quite some time, so we weren't kind of new to the world of running our own business, which is good. I think a lot of entrepreneurs haven't been in that position before, and there's a lot that goes into entrepreneurship that really is just nuts and bolts of running a business. So, we were already well prepared to do that. And we already had a very good client base that had a lot of trust in us. And of course, our client base was top tier federal government agencies. So actually our first product sales were to top tier federal government agencies. And it's kind of, it's not all sort of downhill from there. It doesn't get easier from there, but having those key reference sites at the very beginning makes a huge difference, I think. But they were willing to trust us. And even though they did have a lot of trust in us and a lot of confidence because of the services we've been providing to them, they really did understand our expertise and our qualifications and our proof of value that we already could offer. But they still were taking a risk. This was a new technology, something that not just had never been done in their agency before, but had never been done anywhere in the world before and never been attempted either. So they obviously could see the value proposition. They could see the risks involved in having software this powerful. And together we worked out ways to extract that value and treat those risks. And those became our first clients. And we still have those clients actually 5 years later. We still have all of them. So, it's been a great journey, and one that without already having the background we did, I think would have been much, much harder.
Yeah, I think what you said about, because you guys had started working in the businesses already or the government agencies, building those core foundations as opposed to, a first-time founder that hadn't ever run a business before, getting your head up to speed on payroll and bookkeeping and all that kind of stuff is all, distraction from product. Whereas if you've already built some of that yourself with your other business, that kind of, I would imagine, frees up a bit of your own headspace or the founding team's headspace to know, all right, we know how to do that. Now we can focus on product and client and then delight the customer as part of that with a new product.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also it's easy to not do that stuff in startup mode and then probably end up in a real bad position in scale-up situation. So we already had the governance of running a business, a much smaller business than we have now. We had the foundation, but we also had the appetite for that kind of governance. Like we already had quite a sophisticated and mature management framework for our business, and we kept investing in that. So right at the beginning, we had just a much kind of bigger harness of management and governance than any organization our size would have had or should have had probably at that stage. But we're a compliance company, right? So of course, we're going to have all the policies and all the procedures and all the quality systems and all the security and everything. And that was a lot of work at the beginning to set all that up. It seemed like maybe not a lot of reward, but it really paid dividends, and it continues to because it's such a good, strong foundation. So that's something that really helped us grow so quickly, I think, is that we had done that early investment in all the governance that's required.
Absolutely. And I think foundation's the key word. So speaking of foundations, I want to jump backwards a little bit to kind of your foundations as yourself and as a leader and kind of your origin. So when I was doing research for our interview today, I read that you're actually a graduate from Australian National University here in Canberra. And interestingly, I saw that you have a Bachelor of Arts in Classics, Classical Language, Literature and Linguistics. So to me, it wasn't kind of the most natural pathway into where you are today in security and reg tech. Could you kind of connect some of the dots in between, the passion for Shakespeare through to reg tech?
Yeah, sure. So when I finished college, I had a lot of avenues, right? Because I had good marks, so I kind of could have done anything, and I got a bit of a push, from the parents, like you should do law or you should do this. But I learned about myself through college that the things I did best were the things I liked best. And that's a self-fulfilling little cycle, right? But if you enjoy it, you're going to do it so much better with so much more application and energy and get such a better outcome. So I knew I wanted to do arts. I wanted to do anthropology because I'd done a bit of psychology and sociology at college. I wanted to do anthropology. So I started an anth degree, and I just had to fill a unit. In that first semester, there was a unit left over. So I did a Roman history unit just because I thought everyone needs to know something about Roman history, and I'm ignorant and know nothing. So I did the unit and I just loved it. Like I loved it. And I kind of switched major. I still majored in anthropology, but I picked up classics as well, and switched late into Latin and Greek and ancient history and everything.
Wow.
And loved it. And because I loved it, I did it really well, right? So I got great marks and I had a great experience. And I ended up with a degree, and I did honors actually in classics. And I needed a job, and the avenues were head into academia, because that's pretty much what you do when you study that, or do something else. So I was working part-time. I had a management role, and it just so happened that the first kind of real job that I got offered was in IT. So just after I graduated, and I think part of it was because I had such good marks, that they were willing to take a risk on me. Like here was someone who learned Latin, right? This girl must be smart.
Yeah, impressive. Yeah.
We'll take a risk. And I ended up just working at Hitachi Data Systems. It was the first job that I got, and that's how I ended up in IT. But I found the skills very applicable, because when you do languages of any kind, when you study languages rather than learn them organically, you learn a lot of rules, you learn a lot of patterns, and you learn how to apply them. And when you study arts, you also learn how to research, how to interpret, how to reason, how to find evidence. You learn how to make a compelling argument. And that's really what auditing is. So it's seeing patterns, it's understanding rules, knowing how to apply them, and then being able to sort of cogently explain that in a way that can be understood and is traceable and is evidenced. And the other thing that you learn when you go just beyond the undergrad and you do honours is you also learn that you have to come up with innovative thinking. You've got to come up with something that no one's ever thought of before. That's what you write a thesis about. It has to be something novel, something new. And that's, I think part of that was a good foundation for how I ended up in entrepreneurship, because I'd already been through the process of working out how to come up and formulate your own idea that no one's ever thought of before, and then evidence it and plan it and execute it.
Yeah, wow. I mean, being a student of history, seeing the different rises and falls of civilizations and the patterns that happen through that, I can certainly see how that would be applicable to looking at security, risk management, IT, from all the patterns, even right through to coding and all sorts of stuff from a technical. You wouldn't naturally think of it, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, look, it definitely gives you a big picture view of the world. And I think a lot of anthropologists have ended up in cyber. And in fact, the cyber industry actively recruits people from those kind of sciences and disciplines, because cyber is just data. It's managing data, and data is about people, and people is what we really need to understand. If we want to protect information, we need to know how individuals work, and we need to know how communities work together, and why they do the things that they do. So there's actually a lot of anthropologists in the discipline.
Yeah, right. Excellent. So you mentioned when you were studying, you had a bit of a push from your parents, and then it was kind of academia was the natural kind of pathway. If you were to go back to your earlier self, say, high school with those good marks, university, or that first job, what would be the piece of advice that you'd wish you could give to yourself back then? What's the one thing?
What I've been thinking about more and more lately is maths. So, the reason I got good marks in college is because I could choose what I did. And I just did double major English. I was so good at English, right? I just got super high marks. I'd get like 110% on my essays because I ditched maths early because I was convinced I wasn't good at it. And as soon as I didn't have to do it, I dropped it. And if I'd kept going, it would have pulled the marks down for sure. But I think it would have been better. And I don't regret it because I've ended up where I am now and I wouldn't change that. But now that I've, my stepdaughters I've got one in year 11, I've got one in year 7, and they're both going through the kind of maths that I started to drop. I really kind of started opting out in year 7. I was like, this is not for me. But
Give me a good book to read. That's all I need.
Right. Just give me a book. I just want a book. But it is super interesting. And maybe it's the way they teach it these days, because when I do homework with Asha, it seems more applicable and it makes more sense. And I actually convinced myself I'm not good at maths, but I am good at maths. I use maths all day, every day. And I think I let myself lose confidence when I probably shouldn't have. And that's something that, I'd like to go back and revisit. But I can't do year 7 maths, like I have to learn it because if I did learn it, I've forgotten all about it. So I'd like to go back and pick that up because I think those fundamentals are actually really valuable. And it turns out I haven't kind of needed them, but I'd like to feel more confident in some of that stuff. So I think that's something that if I could look back, I'd say, look, you're not bad at maths. Be more confident. You will use this eventually, and you should persist a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're similar age, and it was exactly the same thing that I had to. As soon as I could drop maths, I dropped it because I kind of my friends were better at it. I wasn't particularly good at it or passionate about it. And, it was my recollection was that it was very abstract, in maths. Outside of, I did a TAFE kind of retail unit where it was about, actually buying groceries and stuff like that. That was practical, right? But I think it's wonderful if the examples now are leaning towards more.
But this is a big push, right? We want to push STEM, and we want to push STEM for women and girls and get them involved. And it's very easy to, like you said, once you feel like you're getting left behind, it's very easy to stay behind. Like it's hard to catch up, and a lot of it is just confidence. And what I realized when I was older is the reason I thought I was an absolute idiot and couldn't do maths is because I didn't understand why. So, this times that makes that, and it does this thing, and you flip the equation upside down. But why? And I thought that I was a moron because I didn't understand why that would work. But what I needed to know and what I know now is you're not meant to know why. You don't study proofs until university, right? You just got to follow the rule and just trust the process. And if I'd understood that then, and that's what I try to help my stepdaughters understand now, you're not dumb because you don't really understand how this is working. You just need to know how to make it work, right? So I think that's a good way that we can increase confidence, is just to make it a bit less esoteric and a little bit less like hard to understand and achieve, and just get real down to earth with it. Like it's just a rule, it's just a pattern. And I learned how to decline and conjugate every noun and verb in the Latin language. Like I can learn the patterns of maths. I just didn't try, and I'd like to try now.
Excellent. So let's jump forward to, we're in 2023 now, and I know Castle Point originally began, as you're saying, as a consultancy back in 2012, and then you went on to focus on, inventing this world first solution, approximately 2016, I think. So fast forward today, where when I see you on social media or look on your website, Castle Point has won a whole heap of fantastic awards. So industry recognized. And as a security technology leader over that 10-year period, what do you think's been the most interesting evolution in the security or reg tech space that you've kind of witnessed from consulting to platform to now?
Yeah, well, I think last year, 2022, I was named Australia's most outstanding woman in IT security.
I was in
And
the audience.
you're in the audience, yay. And the reason for that is because just now in the last couple of years, and then more and more, like it's snowballing every week, there's a new story about this. Cyber has understood that records is the other side of the coin. They used to be very separate. And when I started my career and when I released this product, people would say, investors or clients or partners, they'd say, but this is records management, right? Like, ugh, boo, records management, boring. Why do we care about records management? But because records management is cyber. So, again, if you don't know what you have, you can't manage it, you can't protect it. But importantly, and as you know, I am an ANU graduate, so this is a good example of why. Importantly, if you keep stuff longer than you're meant to keep it, your breaches are bigger than they should be by rights. And that's why a records manager, yes, I'm also a CISA and a CISM, right? But, I'm a records manager, was named the cyber, guiding light for that year, because the two things are so joined together. So ANU 2018 got hacked, foreign state actor, 19 years worth of staff and student data taken, including mine. Now this foreign state actor has my tax file number. That's cool. But I graduated like 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago. My record should have only been kept for 7. So when you don't manage the life cycle of data, when you don't manage the retention, you end up with the impact of a breach being much bigger than it should be. And risk is a product, right? It's a combination of likelihood and impact. And we've spent really the last 10, 20 years in cyber trying to reduce likelihood. It's all about perimeter protection. It's all about complex passwords. It's about training staff. It's about, how do we reduce the likelihood that we're going to get breached? And what I think we're starting to discover, and regulators are learning this, and boards and executives and the public are learning this, you can't reduce the likelihood to 0. You just can't. You will get breached. The ANU breach, like, bless their hearts, unavoidable. It was one email. You didn't even have to click on the email.
Wow.
Like, it was a sophisticated attack and it could not have been avoided. Really, it couldn't. So you have to understand that you will be breached, and anyone who has your data will be breached, and you personally will be breached. Everyone will be breached. So how can we reduce the impact of the breach if we can't materially reduce the likelihood? Well, it's to not collect data that we don't need. So that's a big push now. Like, why are you asking me for a copy of my driver's license and my passport? Do you really need it? But also it's destroying it as soon as we legally can. However, this is why reg tech tools are so important, because it's very complex and layered regulations about how long you keep things. So it was hard for ANU to know that my record was due for disposal, because parts of my record are in, again, lots of different systems in lots of different formats. They're not joined together. There's no easy way to understand when they come due for disposal and then to go and review them and then to destroy them. That's why we designed our software, because it does that automatically. It says, hey, guess what? I found all this stuff. It's ready for disposal. You should get rid of that because it's risky. And here's where it all is. You can make a decision. But if you dispose of stuff too soon, you also risk causing harm. So a lot of reparations for the stolen generations can't progress because records have been destroyed that should have been kept. In the UK, where I am now, a few years ago, there was a scandal with something called the Windrush generation. So back in the post-war, immigrants came from the Caribbean. They were called the Windrush generation. One of the ships that came first was called the Windrush. And they all moved here to the UK to work. And a few years ago, something called the hostile environment policy was introduced, an immigration policy, which was designed to start kicking people out of the country, basically. And one of the things they got kicked out for was not having papers. Now, this Windrush generation had come without needing passports, without needing visas. That was the deal at the time. Like, you can just come, please come, help us rebuild post-war. But these people now, these elderly people, had no papers, except one bit of evidence was the arrival cards. So when the ships came, the arrival cards were kept and they were stored by a government department in a basement. So that's fine. There's evidence, there's proof, right? Except they wanted to move buildings and the new building didn't have space for the archives. So they destroyed all the arrival cards. Now, had they reached their minimum retention under law? Yes. Is it good practice to dispose of things that have personal information? Definitely. Although they're in a locked basement, like, I don't think they're really at risk of a data spill. But anyway, definitely it's a good practice. However, there were other reasons that they should have been kept. Clearly, they were the only source of evidence that these people were allowed to be in the country. And without that evidence, I think more than 70 people were unlawfully deported. So we've got to be very careful at balancing different regulations, policies, legislation. That's why we need AI to do it, because it's too complex and the scale is too big for humans to manage all of that manually.
Yeah, I mean, wow to all of that. Just honestly, this is part of why I really wanted to have you on these episodes, because we when people are creating their mentoring profiles and they're kind of interested in talking to a range of different mentors, we see pen testing and governance, risk and compliance and a whole range of other stuff. But I really liked what you said around the industry itself and the kind of zeitgeist is, getting that the other side of cyber, as well as the hacky and those types of things, is the reg tech and the data management and where all those types of things are and how you comply with those. And that's a lot of information. One thing to keep it for, critical, like you're saying, people were, deported because there wasn't enough information and complete lives, upended and all sorts of things, compared to, give me your email because I really want to, spam market you for 10 years, right? There's a nuance in between that, right? Like you said, there's only so much a human can do, and particularly if it's in multiple places and they're large organizations or small ones that don't have effective records management. That's where things like AI and different tools can help us all get to a right level of competency, I think.
That's right. And the thing about AI is we've all really recognized now that we need to have it. When we first started providing our software, there was a bit of, it was the idea of using artificial intelligence for regulatory control was very new. There was AI that would help you work out what regulations apply to you, for example, and there still is, but there was no AI that would say, okay, I've looked at all your stuff and these are all the rules and I've mapped all that together with artificial intelligence. Now there's a lot more AI being involved in this kind of value chain of managing data, which is great. Like, it's really good to see that following on from when we introduced that lots more has been incorporated into different processes. But the other thing that's coming really paramount now, and it's on a slighter lag to the understanding of the importance of records management to cyber, is ethical AI. We, again, have been talking about this for 5 years, 10 years, for a long time. And now it's becoming a key focus for regulators also, and for governments and for industry. The problem that we have when we try to manage data like this at scale and at this velocity is if we use the wrong kind of AI, we can end up in a bad outcome for individuals as well. So, for example, this is it's not really AI, right? But it is an algorithm, robo-debt. So what happens when we let machines make decisions that require discretion? What happens when we let an algorithm make a decision and the decision is bad? We end up with like a whole inquiry about it. and huge amounts of compensation, but we also end up with significant harm caused to individuals through that process. So we've got to be very careful how we use machines to make decisions. The decisions have to be defensible. They have to be traceable. They have to be based on evidence. They have to be accurate, and they have to be able to be argued with. You know, you can't have a model whereby you say, well, the AI told me that I could destroy this data, but you can't explain why. Because when someone comes and says, but I needed that data, like now I can't access reparations, I can't access compensation, you can't just say, machine said, it's fine. So the problem with ML, machine learning, is that it is a black box. So we train it, and then it learns, and then it starts making decisions. But the decisions come from an algorithm that humans can't understand. So while there's been a real pickup in AI to manage data at this volume and this velocity, which is essential, we just cannot do it without AI. We just can't handle that scale. The change that's coming now is for organizations to move away from unethical AI that's not transparent or traceable. And a lot of AI is going to have to just stop and start again with a new paradigm, and some will adapt and change. But the outcome needs to be, and we'll see this pick up in the next few years, following on from Robodebt, which was a big deal and really brought this into public consciousness. We'll see more and more organizations insisting that the AI that's used is traceable, is transparent, and is auditable.
A little sunlight into that black box, you know, so that we don't get those type of scenarios to happen is good for everyone. So following into that, you know, working so closely in the RegTech space, what would you say is the main, most misunderstood thing about the RegTech space? If someone's, you know, thinking about RegTech, what do they usually misunderstand about it?
I think it's, again, people don't get the point. So they think that regulatory compliance is about ticking a box. So the point of complying with a regulation is to avoid getting a fine, or to avoid losing your certification or something. Those things are just instruments. They're just levers that we pull to get organizations to comply. Regulation is written around best practice. It's called best practice for a reason. It's the best way to do something that balances risk with value, that balances harm with benefit, right? So now, not all regulations are good. There's some crappy regulations that probably need to change, but most of them are functional. You know, they do something important. So the purpose of RegTech is to make it actually possible to comply with those regulations and therefore reduce those harms or achieve those benefits. And complying with regulations is, yes, about following the right processes and making sure in the data space that we keep things the right amount of time, we protect them the right way. But it's also about being able to show that you comply. A lot of what is important in RegTech is having defensibility. And, you know, again, a breach is almost inevitable. People making mistakes is almost inevitable until we achieve the singularity and AI takes over. And I, for one, will welcome the robot overlords. But we need to show that we made best efforts, right? And when we know what the law is, we need to show that we tried to follow it. Because of AI, the bar is getting higher. So I don't know if you know much about law. I mean, I don't, because I didn't study it like I was meant to when I went to uni, but I know a little bit, and I know about negligence. So something's considered negligence if the harm that could arise is obvious, the harm that could arise is significant, and the cost of mitigating that harm is reasonable. So if you knew that there could be harm and you knew it would be bad and you could have done something about it, you're negligent. But what used to happen in government and industry and everywhere is we'd say, yeah, definitely there would be harm if we spilled all this data. And the harm would be so high. Yep, it would be so high. However, it's just way too hard for us to fix it. So therefore, we're not really negligent, right? It's just act of God. Like, we can't protect all this data. It's not possible. Well, with AI now, it is possible. and the regulators are changing their expectations. So you've spoken to eSafety. eSafety is one of our clients, actually. And like many regulators and government bodies, they're using AI now, like ours and others, that shows that it is possible to do this. And not just possible, it's pretty easy. And it's very affordable. Like, so the bar has gone up a little bit. Like, you can't tell me anymore that it's just too hard. And even last year, maybe 2021, end of 2021, Medicare, I remember, scrapped 6 months worth of backlogged FOI requests. People had come and said, I need my records for accessing insurance schemes, accessing redress schemes, all sorts of reasons. And Medicare just had to throw up its hands and say, look, we're cancelling 6 months of these requests because it's just too hard for us to get this data. If you still need them, ask again. But we just need a break. Like we need a minute because it's too hard for us to do this. And there was no real repercussion for that. It literally was too hard. It's a big network, lots of systems, lots of data, really labor intensive to do this search. But with AI, it's not too hard anymore. So we'll see less and less of those excuses, I think, as AI becomes more and more prevalent across all kinds of industry.
Yeah, I think the excuse of, chucking something particularly as critical as, regulatory, people's records in the too hard basket just doesn't cut the mustard anymore. And, with the recent breaches and all sorts of things about what the impact of that is and the human element of what that actually means for people with sensitive information, health information, all sorts of stuff, it just doesn't, it's not good enough anymore.
Yeah, that's right. And we understand harms now better than before. I think we're not in kind of ivory towers anymore, especially in government, thinking that the reason we're doing something is just for our KPIs or something. The reason is because if we don't, it causes real harm to real people. If we can't find information, even just finding it, like the Department of Immigration many years ago couldn't find Vivian Salon's record in their record keeping system. And she was a very vulnerable woman found in a park with a head injury in Lismore and picked up and taken into custody and deported by the Department of Immigration because they couldn't find her record in Trim. And it was there. An inquiry showed it was there the whole time, but the system was so hard to search. So she got deported to the Philippines, a citizen, and left in a home for the dying and destitute in Manila for years until a Good Samaritan tracked her down. But she'd left her little kid at childcare that day, never picked him up. And he went into the foster system. Like, that is the kind of harm. Just because you just can't find something, that's the kind of harm that can happen. And at a bigger scale, in the UK, here in the UK, you remember the Manchester bombing? Well, the National Police Intelligence Database had 400 pieces of information about that guy that were missed before that bombing. And the inquiry found that if they'd been found, if that system had been more searchable, because it was impossible to search, that attack not only could have, but would have been prevented. So even just having systems and processes where we can't find stuff, that can cause catastrophic harm. And we need to be thinking about the, down the line, who are the stakeholders that this data is about or are for, and what could be the impacts on them if we can't find it, if we can't audit it, we can't report on it, we can't retain it, preserve it, destroy it, protect it. That's what we need to be thinking about. And that's what RegTech does.
Yeah, amazing. I want to flip notes a little bit here to the conversation from RegTech to running a RegTech company itself. So running a company is hard. Founding a company adds a next level of difficulty, a next layer to it. So as the founder of a founder in the security industry, can you recall a particularly unexpected challenge that you faced since founding the company, and how did you overcome it? Did you struggle through solo, or are you more of the type of person to seek advice from mentors or your board as you kind of grew?
Yeah, I've got great mentors, and and I tap them when weird stuff happens that I don't know what to do with, which isn't, it's not frequent, but one of the challenges I found was it's just like an age and stage thing. Like as we were founding the company, that's when I started having kids. So I had two babies through the startup phase. Um, and and everything that goes with that is complicated and challenging. And in this industry, there still are not a lot of women. There are still not a lot of people who have experienced or been involved in women's reproductive health and don't really have a clear understanding of what that means. So, in one example, I was speaking at a conference once at a hotel, and I needed to pump milk and there was nowhere to do it. And they sent me first to the disabled toilet and the door didn't lock properly. And when I came out of there, there was a guy in a wheelchair waiting to go in, like it was disaster. And eventually they ended up setting me up behind a curtain in a public lobby at the top of the stairs to do my pumping, because in this entire hotel, I remind you, there was not a single room that I could use to do that, even though I was a speaker at this conference and was a paid sponsor of this conference. Like it just was not even considered. There was no contingency for what if anyone attending this conference in any capacity needs to pump. It just wasn't a thing. And then later, must be 2021 or maybe start of last year. God, I can't remember now. I actually got diagnosed with a tumor, a really rare, very aggressive kind of tumor. And I had to have chemotherapy. That was the plan. I needed chemo, and the doctors recommended I do egg harvesting first. They're like, look, after this, it's cactus. So anything you want to save it now. Records manage it, right, in the in the for future reference. So, of course, I had to fit the schedule around this egg harvesting. They inject you with all these hormones to try to make you produce extra eggs, and then they take blood tests every single day to see what the hormone levels are. Anyway, I had to move a meeting. I had to push it back half an hour from 10 a.m. to 10:30 because that morning, 7 a.m. that morning, I had to have an anesthetic and have my eggs harvested. And somehow I still decided we should do this meeting. But anyway, I asked to push it back, and I got pushback on that, saying it was unprofessional of me, as the owner of the company, by the way, unprofessional of me to push this meeting back with such short notice. And couldn't I have planned this better? Right? No, I couldn't actually. I can't actually control when I ovulate. Surprisingly, I'm literally about to have chemotherapy. Like, give me a break. But that was the pushback, and that was the immediate response. Like, why is this woman's issue getting in the way of our professional experience with you? So, that kind of stuff. I don't think the industry yet is inoculated well enough against the comings and goings and the toings and froings of women's health and women's experiences. It's still seen very much as an outlier, like a weird problem to be dealing with that no one could possibly accommodate. And that needs to change. And that's been a challenge for me. But then again, I don't have a control group to test against. Like I don't have a sliding doors moment where I was a woman in this direction, I was a male founder in that direction, see what the outcome would have been. You just don't know. But that's been my experience that I think could and should be better for other women going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, all of those are terrible, personal examples that you've had to go through, right? And to top off, the added fun of having discover you have a tumor and then going through radiography and all sorts of things on top of that, right? To just not have the support and to be, almost dehumanized in ways, it's disgusting.
Yes. And look,
really.
a lot of people experience this. Yeah. Any kind of chronic health issue. And I'm okay now. My tumor's in remission. It's very small now. So good news all round. But a lot of people don't have that experience. A lot of people don't have that outcome. And we can do better, and we must do better at understanding those impacts on everyone that we work with, not just
Yeah.
the founders, not just the bosses, not just when it's like the scary like tumor story, but any kind of chronic illness. I think we need to work out how to accommodate that, particularly mental health issues as well. I think that, you know, every industry can do better on this. And there's definitely a
Yeah.
push for it, which is great. And I'd like to see it changing. But it's something we as founders can do in startups and scale ups, is make sure that we make space for that, and that we make concerted and deliberate efforts to support people throughout different kind of health challenges. That's something we set up again really early when we set up all this big harness of governance. We set up an EAP. Even when we only had 3 staff, we had an EAP. You know, there are things that we can all do and we can all contribute to make these experiences better for everyone.
Yeah, 100%. I think as industry leaders, but also, you know, thank you to you for sharing these stories as well. You know, talking about them openly is how other people get confidence, or how organizations might rethink what they've been doing, particularly if they've got people in their team that, you know, might be, you know, new mums that are, you know, rushing home at lunch to pump, or whatever it is. Like, you know, my wife going at the moment with our 1-year-old, and
Yep.
you know, having to pick up from a side conversation that, well, actually the workplace supports that with some paid time on top of your, you know, normal hours, but she wasn't aware of that except for a side kind of conversation. And
Right.
so, you know, just talking about these things openly and publicly, I think, you know, can only do betterment for, you know, individual businesses, but industries more whole. So thank you for sharing that story with us, or those stories.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I always love talking about this stuff because you're right, we don't talk about it enough. There are lots of things we don't talk about enough. We don't talk about menopause. We don't talk about pregnancy loss. We don't talk about, you know, particularly we don't talk about mental health issues because of the taboo. So, you know, there's a time and a place for having these conversations, but we need to make more time and more space for them when people want to have them in the workplace, for sure.
100%. So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, you as the founder, and, you know, you were growing, you know, from the consultancy to the product offering, and in those early stages, you made the decision to pursue the private investment round. And so now that you've raised multiple funding rounds to support your scaling, can you talk us a little bit about what that process was like, pitching and then securing your first kind of check, you know, how that felt? And did you experience any additional challenges being in the Australian security startup environment?
Yeah, again, hard to know. If being in Australia, being a female founder, being from Canberra, like, it's really hard to know how much of an impact those things had. When you look at the stats, like, it probably wasn't good, but it worked out okay for us. The approach we took to fundraising, because again, like, I'm not a maths person, I'm not a finance person, never
Yes, you
was, and
are,
never
Rachel.
really thought
Yes,
about
you
it.
are. Remember,
I know, yes, I
confidence in my
do
maths
maths.
ability.
But I actually did do the maths because I actually am actually really good at maths. But what I did was I calculated our own valuation. So before I started talking to investors, I found all the ways SaaS companies are valued, all the different methods and modes that are broadly accepted and used by different investors as to how to value a company. And I calculated all of our metrics, you know, growth and lifetime value, acquisition costs, net revenue retention, all those things, and put them all in a big spreadsheet. And I could show those investors when we went around and talked to them, this is our valuation. I mean, what's your method? Because here it is. And here's all the tables showing that based on our numbers, this is how you should be valuing the company. And, you know, they're like, well, great. Awesome. Thanks for doing that. Because the way
Was
it's
that
meant to
received
work with
well,
investors,
or was it?
right? I mean, I think so. I think so. Of course, what investors are motivated to do is have your valuation as low as possible. what you're motivated to do is have it as high as possible, so you meet somewhere in the middle. But when you're just starting out, it's very hard to know what to expect. Like, how do you value your own company? It seems so subjective. So making it more objective was really helpful, and accessing mentors. So you're from Canberra as well. Sebrin was so useful to me, the Canberra Business Innovation Network, free service funded by the government and some other partners, and provided me with that person I could go and talk to and say, hey, Craig, like, explain this to me. Like, can you go through this term sheet with me? Because it is, again, it's written, and the language and the jargon is inaccessible. It's designed to feel inaccessible, just like maths used to be in high school, but it isn't if you can break it down and you can understand it. So that was our approach. Is we basically did our own valuation. And since then, we've kept that up. We have such good recording. We're records managers. We have such good metrics. We have such good data. It really helps us have all those conversations and prove not just the value that we offer, but also the sustainability of the company. And that's been the real key.
And how did you celebrate that first check? Was there something special that you guys did, or was it straight back to work?
Actually, I did. So we did one little angel round, and then we did a small Series A with Main Sequence Ventures, who were our kind of main investor.
So big VC in Australia. That's great.
Yeah, they're fantastic fun. Deep tech, which suits us well. So when we got that and we had to sign the term sheet, we printed it in the office, and it came out of the printer with all this scribble on it from my kids, because they'd been writing on the paper and then had stacked the paper back in the printer. And instead of throwing it away, I was like,
You framed it. Absolutely.
This is the experience. This is the experience that we want to remember. Yeah, this is special. So it's all the writings upside down, but I framed that thing and I put it on the wall, because that's the experience, right? As we were raising money, we had these little kids running our own business, kids in the office, like everything's kind of chaos, and they're part of the story, right? So that was how I celebrated it, is I printed that and put it on the wall. And then I printed it again on clean paper and signed it and scanned it and returned it and got the money. But, for us, it's never really been about, what's the value of the company? How much is it worth? How much money can we get? That seems like a real kind of second string to what we're doing. Mm-hmm. It's just about, how do we keep delivering what we're trying to deliver? How do we keep providing this value to more people in more places and reduce more harm? That's really the focus. And you need funds to do it. But I think, anyone going into startup and scale up world need to they need to feel a sense of satisfaction in the vision, because satisfaction in raising funds or having money, it's like a hedonic treadmill, right? Like, you get it, you get satisfied, and then that becomes a new normal, and then it probably feels less satisfying anymore. Like, you just can never really forget about that. Just think about the things that are continually bringing you that good feeling. The use cases you deliver, the incredible case studies, the outcomes that you get. That's the stuff that is a limitless supply. Like, that's a constant tap of goodwill. Whereas investor money, that's definitely not limitless.
Yeah. And speaking of goodwill, I want to just finish up our wonderful conversation. Thank you again. Because we're part of the mentoring program with AWSN and this Trailblazer series, showcasing role models and industry leaders in the security and leadership space. You mentioned before that you do have mentors and that you call on them infrequently, but for weird kind of stuff, out of the box type things usually. So, are you able to share, an example of when you might call on someone, and how do you personally prepare when you're meeting with a mentor? Is there kind of work that you do beforehand depending on it, or is it really you go in and you do a bit of a dump and reflect and those types of things? Well, what's kind of your process?
Yeah. So the first thing that I like to do the first time I talk to someone new, and I've been given access to so many incredible mentors through different programs that I've done, through the Icon Grant, through Boosting Female Founders, through the Springboard program, Heads Over Heels. Like there are so many great programs that connect founders and entrepreneurs with mentors. So the first thing is to do a bit of research into them and understand their background, and think about the things in that background that are relevant to us, and then think about our biggest challenge at the moment and the sets of challenges, and then just check how they overlay, because they'll just be a couple of touch points where things that we have a challenge with, they could maybe add value on, and that'll be the start of the conversation. But what I do when I'm talking to mentors for any reason is I take notes, and I just take notes as I go, right? So in the notebook, as I'm talking and they're talking, I'm kind of just like typing, getting all the details down, because it's really hard to remember when you circle back a few months later, a few weeks later, even a few days later. Maybe this is post-COVID brain fog, or maybe it's just, we're just busy. Like a lot
Yeah.
happens every day. It's really hard to access those memories with any kind of clarity. So in the next conversation, I will, before the conversation, go back to those notes. What did we talk about? And what did we say? And what did they say they would do? Have they done it? Because sometimes maybe that doesn't always happen, right? Because they're busy too. And what did I say I would do? And did I do that? So let's pick up where we left off on something actionable, and tangible, and let's refresh our memory. Otherwise, you end up, I think, having just the same conversations over again with no real purpose or intent. So that's usually how I engage with mentors.
Yeah, wonderful. And so as a featured trailblazer in our series, would you mind sharing what advice you have for our mentees in the program, in the AWSN Mentoring Network, that are interested in starting or transitioning from other fields into security? Is it something you encourage and welcome, or is it oh my God, get away kind of opportunity for them?
Welcome, join us. I think the thing is, right, that everybody now is a digital worker. Even people out in, spraying strawberries in fields and in the mines, they are using technology and creating data. And we are all digital workers now. Secondly, all digital information has risk, all of it. Even mining information. Paul Maguire was a young father of two who died in the grass tree mine in Queensland because the records weren't kept up to date. He was sent on a job card to a dangerous part of the mine, opened the door, overwhelmed by the fumes, and killed because the digital information wasn't put into the system the way it should have been. Like even in the very edges and the periphery of kind of IT, one mistake in data can cost a life, no matter what industry you work in. And because of that, because data is everywhere and because risk is constant, we are all working in cyber, whether we know it or not. We all already are. We're already having to think about how we capture information, how we protect it, how we preserve it, so that we can reduce harm and so that we can access value. So you're kind of already doing it, is the message. You're already doing it. So if you want to do it, like capital IT, if you want to do cyber instead of just doing cyber day to day, there are lots of avenues in to do that. And you can come in from any discipline, because again, what we're trying to do with this data is reduce harm for people. So if you're in a discipline like mine, a background like mine that understands about people and understands about communities, then you're already at an advantage, because you get the point of what we're trying to do. And again, you'll do it so much better if you understand it, and if you understand the value and you understand the reason, if you enjoy it and you like it. So that's why we need to bring in people from all different disciplines so they can bring that perspective, because at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're reducing harm. Harm to who? Harm to what? Things that we care about. right? So if you care about something and you're interested in something, there is a space in cyber for you to help protect that and help preserve that and help get more value from that than we could before.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I can't think of a better message and note for our emerging talent in the cyber and security space. Doesn't matter what domain, there is space for you in the security industry, and you can bring your own experience or a new lens coming into all sorts of different organizations. So we've got our final bonus question that we like to ask as part of the series. So I know you're tackling and conquering the world with RegTech. If you were if you had the space or the funds to invest, say, $1 million in an Australian startup company, another non-RegTech one, what big, hairy, audacious goal would that startup be trying to solve, and why would you want to have it succeed?
Climate change. Just no doubt climate change. If I could be a climate change founder, I would. We're trying to save the world with what we're doing, but they're trying to save the planet. And that's what we need. Like, that's what I'm worried about. That's the big existential issue that we have to deal with. There's no point reducing harm on all these people if our planet is going to cause harm to everybody and everything because of, the trajectory that it's on. So that's what I care about, big picture. And I'm just not equipped to really do anything about it except provide my software for free to organizations who are addressing it, which is the one thing we can do, and we do. But that's the challenge that will unite all of humanity. I hope that maybe we can do something about if we take action and we take it quickly.
Wonderful. What a wonderful sentiment to finish on. You are a wonderful human being. Thank you so much for joining us for this series and sharing your own personal anecdotes with us and your experience as a founder, for your lens on the security industry. I'm sure the mentors and mentees will get a lot of value out of it. So this has been our episode 3 with Rachel Greaves, CEO and co-founder of Castlepoint.